Hello and welcome back to the lead pile. In tonight's video, I'm going to be starting a project which I have wanted to do for a long time. This is one of my favourite fantasy series, and I've always thought it really does deserve to be showcased on the wargaming battlefield. Now, although there is currently a 28mm scale version of this game, well, pushing 32mm scale, I think this particular fantasy setting would be particularly suited to 6mm. And if this t-shirt isn't a little giveaway, then this map should definitely be a giveaway. That's right, I'm going to be starting a Game of Thrones project where I'm going to be bringing to life the armies of the Seven Kingdoms in 6mm. And in this video, we're going to be starting with these guys. Big old Bobby B and the Baratheons. Well, that means we've got to include this guy too. But more of that in a mo. House Baratheon. Ours is the Fury. House Baratheon, of course, have the triumphant stag as their sigil, and they hail from Storm's End in the Stormlands. And they have many vassal bannermen to call to arms. Now, at the time of Game of Thrones, the house is led by Bobby B, Robert Baratheon, and his two brothers, Stannis and Renly. Now, Robert's guards, his soldiers, are seen a lot through Season 1, and they wear these kind of beige tunics, gambesons, with cloaks of white with an orange trim. They have kind of like silvery black gunmetal helmets with little stag antlers on them, and of course the yellow shields, although some depictions have them with orange shields. So you have the choice really to paint them in orange or to paint them in yellow. Now things take a turn when Bobby B pops his clogs and Renly and Stannis fight for the throne. Renly, of course, features this green colouring in the book or this greeny blue in the show. His banners. His men are basically Robert's men, but with green shields. And then we have Stannis, who, quite the opposite, is in drab black to match his personality. However, he has kept the yellow for his main colour on the banner, although slightly more saturated yellow. But then he has the fiery heart and the black stag as well for the Lord of Light. So, essentially, we have quite a variety to pick from when it comes to painting Baratheons, depending on when you want to have them represented. If you're going for the Battle of Blackwater, the kind of main fight we see them in Game of Thrones, then you can have all three. Okay, so here are our miniatures. I am using some Bacchus 6mm metal models, and these are from their feudal range. And I've chosen these because of the style of helmet and that kind of gambeson that they're wearing as well. It kind of matches what we see at the Battle of Blackwater. So to paint that kind of padded body part of the model, I am using a light tan colour, and for that I've gone with my Games Workshop Citadel range and I've painted it in Baneblade Brown. Once I've painted all of that, I then addressed the face and the hands, and for this it's just a simple blob, and it is a blob of Kislev flesh. Of course, you can use any shade of flesh you want, any shade, and I've gone for a nice bright shade of Kislev flesh as opposed to a base paint of like a Bugman's Glow or something. Okay, so at this point I've painted in most of the body, and I'm going to paint the trim, and that's going to be in the colour of the Baratheons, which is an orange/yellow. Up to you what you decide to use. I've gone with the orange because Robert Baratheon's guards in season 1 have got that orange trim. Okay, so you could just paint them all yellow or all orange, but because I want to include some of Renly Baratheon's soldiers, I've decided to use this Aderly Emerald shade, which is basically just a kind of almost turquoisey colour. I think that quite nicely ties in with the blue-green aquamarine sort of colour of Renly's banners. And that's because I want to get the kind of mix of the different Baratheon lords here. Okay, so at this point I diverted and I decided to hell with it. I've painted the orange of Robert Baratheon shade. I've got the green, the blue of Renly's. Why not just go for the generic traditional yellow as well? So I've taken a base paint, Averland Sunset, and it's just basically a nice rich mustardy yellow, and I'm going to slap that down as the base coat for highlighting it later with a lighter shade of yellow. Okay, so with the kind of fun colour choices now painted on, I was left with more dull, boring parts, and that was to paint the boots. And I did this with Black Templar because it goes on nice and easy. And then I also had to paint in the spear shafts, and I used a pretty generic brown, I think maybe a Gothor brown. I just picked a random brown, whatever you like to use for your wood. And you can paint scabbards and belts if you want. I haven't because it's 6mm and I've got hundreds to paint, so you can just leave it be. And then I've taken a kind of silver colour and I've painted that for the helmets and spear points as well. You could use a darker gunmetal because it's 6mm, you want it to stand out on the table, and we're going to be darkening it down with the next step once we've painted in all of these colours, which is of course to add our shade, and I've used Citadel's Agrax Earthshade, and this will darken everything down. So if it looks a bit bright and a bit bold, that gets darkened down. So once we've allowed the wash to dry, these models are finished. They've been painted, they've been shaded. But if you want them to pop on the table and you can be arsed, then the next step is a good way to help make them pop, and that is to highlight. Now normally when highlighting we would use a repeat of the previous colours that we'd used. So where I'd used a base paint of Averland Sunset, I would apply the wash, and then I would reapply that Everland Sunset, and then I would highlight the edge highlights with a brighter yellow. I've got rid of that step. Because it's 6mm, because we want a nice difference in contrast, I've just gone straight in for the upper highlight. So, for the yellow, the Everland Sunset, I've highlighted that up with a Bad Moon Yellow. With the orange base coat, I've gone for a Fire Dragon Bright, and with the greeny shade, I've gone for quite a stark contrast, and that's God Blaster Green. If you are used to painting historicals, these paints probably sound a bit insane, but essentially you're wanting at least two stages brighter, or if you're traditionalist, just add a lot more white to your original paint, and the job's a good. So, because I'm a glutton for sin, I decided I was going to highlight everything on this strip. So that meant the Black Templar got a highlight of Dawnstone. Again, that's a lighter mid-tone of grey rather than just a slightly less dark black, I suppose. The kind of Gambison padded kind of top that the guys are wearing. I'd initially painted that Baneblade brown, so I went in with Screaming Skull, which again is 2 stages up in terms of highlight. And then with the like of the metallics, I wanted to keep a lot of that browny shade in there to give it a bit of a rusty look, so I've just gone on an extreme edge highlight with something like Stormhost Silver. What you can also do if you really like to emphasize that contrast is what I've done, which is I've then added a little tiny bit of white, just a tiny bit of white, a wee small amount of white, which I've then mixed into those initial paints as well. And then in some cases, like the metallics, I've actually just gone in straight with a flat, raw white, and I've just tickled the tip of those spears and helmets. And that's really going to help accentuate that pop and the shine as well, which we often overlook on metal, especially when we're going to be applying a wash. It'll lose some a wash. When we're going to be applying a varnish, it's going to lose some of that sheen. So that wee fleck of white helps give that effect. And at the end of the day, these are 6mm minis. We're going to be looking at them from about 4 foot away. It's going to be really hard to tell who's who, so bold colours is best. And there we go, finished. So a nice quick paint job for these guys. 6mm is great. You can just slap the paint on, and you don't need to go to the extremes I've done. You can just paint them up. You could just paint the bodies all in yellow if you wanted, and then just do the faces and the boots and the helmets, and that would do. But, you know, I like taking too long on these guys for my 6mm minis, which is why I've not got a finished army yet, but we're working on it. So I'm really happy how these guys turned out. I wanted to get that Battle of the Blackwater kind of look, because that's the game I'm hoping to use these guys for. So that meant having a mixed unit. I'm going to want to have some of those green shields and some of those orange and yellow shields in there as well to represent Renly, his Bannerman, and Robert's old Bannermen, who have flocked to Stannis' side. Who wouldn't? He's the one true king. So Stannis' guys have not been represented here. That's because they have a completely different uniform. I keep saying uniform, that's not what you would say, is it? Heraldry, outfit, apparel. And they've got different helmets and everything, different shield shapes to boot. So I'll be painting them in a separate video. But here we've got Robert's guys in orange there, and we've got a nice mix as well next to them. So this has been good fun. I've got a lot more to get painting. I will crack on with that, and hopefully the idea is that along the line we will have a battle of the Blackwater, and that will be pretty cool. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again real soon.